We're in the midst of a climate crisis, which is arguably one of the biggest challenges the human race has ever faced in its short existence on the planet.
In the UK, 50% of annual greenhouse emissions are to do with the built environment. So if I said to you that engineers are responsible for 5% of UK annual emissions, that's quite a big number for a very small number of the population. As engineers, we have a lot of power at our fingertips.
As sustainability lead for Walsh, my primary goal is to reduce our company's carbon footprint and work towards paving the way to net zero carbon by 2040, which is one of the commitments we've recently made.
Us as engineers, we have to take responsibility for that. The environment doesn't care where the carbon comes from. And as an analogy, if your neighbour's house is on fire and you know how to put it out, you help put it out. You don't say it's not my problem. So I think that's why it's important we really take ownership of that and find ways to solve the problem.
One of our core values at Walsh is designing lean from the outset. We can make a huge impact just by reducing the volume of material we're designing at the beginning. And as part of that, we can make sure that the carbon emissions are limited as much as possible right from the beginning.
So at Walsh, we've been on this journey for a few years, and I would say that one of the biggest helps that we've had is monitoring our projects, monitoring and measuring our impact. And that takes a bit of time, and that takes some data collection. But the advantage of that is that you then understand where you are. So the process is measure, monitor, reduce, basically, and we have a vision to get to 2050 net zero, and we're incrementally reducing that as we go along.
At the moment, we're conducting a number of research and development activities. We're working hard with forward thinkers in the industry, such as the Institution of Structural Engineers, UK Green Building Council. We're working with them to make sure we're ahead of the game. Now, at the moment, that means we are specifying cement replacement materials, but we know that that resource is limited. The resource has to travel for a number of miles to get to site, and it's not always produced in the UK. So we know that this is going to run out in the future, and we're working with industry leaders to make sure we're ready for when the moment comes when we don't have enough of that anymore.
So our strategy for dealing with it is a two-tier approach. The first tier, I would say, is our immediate and short-term impact. So basically what is happening between now and next 5 years. And I really believe that the knowledge that we have and the technology that we have is very achievable to reduce 30–40% of what we're using at the moment by 2030, so within 10 years' time.
I've recently come on board as sustainability lead for Walsh, and what that means for me is firstly making sure we're measuring and monitoring our carbon input into the environment. As part of that, we are ISO 14001 accredited, and I'm responsible for managing that system. Alongside that, we have a number of research and development activities which intend to help our engineers learn about the best ways of designing sustainably.
To keep it simple, we're looking at it in the short term and long term. So the short term, we have technology and knowledge to deal with the next 5 years at least, possibly 10 years. 10–15 years down the line, we are going to need technology in the industry to catch up, to advance their technologies, whether it's new materials, it's whether it's in creating the materials that we have now with less carbon, whether we design things differently. I think how we approach things in 10–15 years' time is different to how we approach things now. However, that shouldn't put us in paralysis to say we can't do things right now. We can do things right now, and we are doing things right now.
In recent years, we've been working really hard to develop our internal embodied carbon calculator tool, which our engineers use to measure and monitor the embodied carbon of their projects. This is vital for us as a business, so we can understand the impact that we're making, not only for our developments, but in the world as a whole. What our engineers can do is use the tool to take structural elements, take their volumes, and overall find the embodied carbon of the structure that they have designed.
In parallel, in Tier 2, we are putting research and investment on new technologies and that disruptive change that we are going to need from 2030 on, because the solutions that we're going to use in 10 years' time are not going to be the solutions that we use today. And the solutions that we use today may not be sustainable in 10 years' time. I think I've seen a shift globally. I think we've all noticed in the past year or two there's a lot more coverage about the climate. And within the industry, that conversation has certainly shifted from, say, what it was 4 or 5 years ago when people were concentrating on operational carbon and really looking at buildings in whole life carbon. Various institutions and bodies are now recognizing that and setting targets for that. So I really welcome that, because I can see people are waking up to it.
As structural and civil engineers working in the built environment, which represents 40% of global carbon emissions, we really need to be improving on the designs that we produce. And that doesn't just mean looking for new and innovative ways of designing, which is definitely important for the future to reach our net zero carbon goals. But we can make a difference right now just by questioning or challenging the rules of thumb that we've been working to for years and years.
The conversation in the industry has changed, whereas a few years ago it was all about operational carbon, and in the past few years it has been discussing whole life carbon, which embodied carbon is a part of, and we welcome that discussion. And our real influence is on the embodied carbon of a building. So as buildings are getting more and more efficient, that embodied carbon is getting higher and higher, and on a typical modern building that could be as high as 70%. The way we can approach reducing the embodied carbon in the short to medium term, say within the next 5 years' time, really doesn't need any disruptive technology that is not out there. What we have in front of us and the knowledge that we have is absolutely achievable to get there. There's got to be a real partnership with the client. I think what clients want from their consultants is ideas, it's options, it's strategies to get there. I think we take responsibility for that carbon as if it's our own, and we plan out how we're going to reduce that. So whether it's to do with the grid of the building, whether it's to do with the loading, whether we can relax the performance criteria, whether it's the materiality, whether it's the construction methodology, all of these things add up to helping them reduce their carbon.
To find out more about how we are tackling the climate crisis, download our sustainability mission and zero carbon report now at www.walsh.co.uk. Real responsibility, real change.